cartel ship exposed. Ship carrying large amount of drugs and cash belonging to world's most dangerous. Terrorist group destroyed by U.S. military. September 3rd, 2025. Under the scorching sun of the Southern Caribbean, the United States launched a bloody military strike against one of the world's most feared drug cartels. The target, a 7,200-ton, 110-meter cargo ship operated by the Tren de Aragua and traveling through international waters after leaving Venezuela. On board was a huge fortune in blood, money, 300 tons of methamphetamine, precursors, enough to make 190 tons of crystal meth worth more than $569 million and 13,000 crates of cash, destined to fund terrorism across the Americas. Worse still, 42 civilians were being held as slaves, forced to work under armed guard. For years, Tren de Aragua has been a nightmare linked to more than 2,000 murders and 3,500 human trafficking cases. But this morning, the nightmare was attacked by the U.S. military. How can U.S. Special Forces attack while ensuring the safety of civilians? How to approach the target? I will show you the truth right now. September 3rd, 2025, 10:45 a.m. The calm waters of the Southern Caribbean concealed a storm of steel and violence about to unfold. On the horizon, a vessel measuring 110 m in length and displacing over 7,200 tons cut across the international waters. Outwardly disguised as a civilian cargo ship, it carried a darker truth. Inside its hull, the infamous Tren de Aragua cartel had hidden 300 tons of methamphetamine, precursors, and held over 40 civilians, forced into labor as prisoners. For years, Tren de Aragua has been more than a criminal syndicate. It has operated like a shadow army. Intelligence reports linked the group to over 2,000 murders, 3,500 cases of human trafficking, and an empire of drug distribution stretching from Venezuela to the streets of Miami, Houston, and New York. They were not just smugglers. They were a designated foreign terrorist organization working under the protection of Nicolas Maduro's regime.
Ship carrying large amount of drugs and cash belonging to world's most dangerous terrorist group destroyed by U.S. military.
Cargo on board
September
was
3rd, 2025.
Processed, those
Under
300 tons of
the
chemicals,
Southern Caribbean,
precursors could produce 190
military
tons
strike
of
against one
crystal
of the
meth worth nearly $569 million
the target
on the U.S. market, alongside the drugs,
110-meter cargo
for 13,000 barrels
by
of
the
cash,
Tren de Aragua,
a fortune,
and traveling
used to
through
finance
international
weapons,
waters after
assassinations,
leaving Venezuela.
and terror across the western
On board was a
hemisphere.
huge fortune in blood
As
money.
the ship pushed further
300 tons
north,
of
it
methamphetamine
represented more than
precursors,
a
enough
cartel's
to make
lifeline.
190 tons
It was a
of crystal
floating
meth
arsenal
worth
of
more than
chaos,
$569
ticking time
million,
bomb, narcotics, money, and human
crates of
suffering.
cash,
And on this
destined to
day,
fund terrorism
America
across
had
the
chosen
Americas.
to make its
Worse
move.
still,
This was
42
not
civilians
just
were
another
being held as slaves,
smuggling ship.
forced to work
it was
under
a
armed
floating
guard.
time,
For
bomb
years,
filled with poison
Tren de
meant for
Aragua
our
has been a nightmare,
children, guarded by
linked to
killers,
more than 2,000
and
murders,
powered
and
by blood money.
3,500
Leaving
human
it
trafficking
unchecked
cases.
would have been leaving
But this
death
morning,
to
the nightmare
drift toward
was
our
attacked
shores.
by the U.S. military.
U.S. forces deployed.
How can U.S.
U.S.
Special
Secretary
Forces
of
attack
Defense.
while ensuring
Cartels
the safety of
like
civilians?
Tren de
How to
Aragua
approach
thrive
the target?
on fear.
I will show you the truth
Do you
right
believe
now.
operations like this can
September
finally
3rd,
stop them?
2025,
Leave your answer in the
10:45
comments.
a.m.
By
The
11:05
calm waters
a.m.
of the
on
Southern
September
Caribbean
3rd,
concealed a storm of
2025,
steel and violence
the
about
United
to
States
unfold.
had already
On the
positioned
horizon,
its
a vessel
pieces on the
measuring
chessboard,
110
while
meters in
the
length and
drug
displacing over
vessel moved steadily through
7,200
the
tons
Southern
cut across the
Caribbean.
international
American
waters.
forces
Outwardly
prepared an
disguised
operation
as a civilian
as
cargo
precise as
ship,
it
it
was
carried
ruthless.
a darker truth.
The mission was
Inside
simple
its
in
hull,
theory,
the infamous
but terrifying in
Tren de Aragua
execution.
cartel
Underscore
had
underscore the
hidden 300
cartel's floating
tons of
fortress
methamphetamine
without
precursors
risking the lives
and held
of
over
innocent
40 civilians
hostages.
forced
The
into
opening
labor as
move
prisoners.
came from the
For
skies.
years, Tren
From
de
a covert
Aragua
base
has been
on
more than a
Curacao,
criminal syndicate.
the Pentagon
It has
launched
operated
50
like a shadow army.
reconnaissance Kamikaze
reports linked the group
UAVs,
to
each
over
no larger
2,000
than
murders,
a motorcycle,
3,500
yet
cases of
packed
human
with
trafficking,
40 pounds,
and an empire
warhead
of drug
and
distribution
advanced
stretching
targeting
from
software,
Venezuela to the streets
flying
of Miami,
just 150
Houston,
feet
and New
above
York.
sea level.
They were not just smugglers.
Skimmed beneath
they
radar
were a designated
coverage.
foreign terrorist
Invisible until it was
organization
too late.
working under the protection of Nicolas
they
Maduro's
carried
regime.
Explosive
Their
power
reach was
to
measured
rival
not
the
in
impact
miles,
of
but in
2
lives
Tomahawk
destroyed.
cruise missiles.
The value of
Yet
the cargo
there,
on board was
precision
staggering.
was far
If processed,
deadlier.
those
Meanwhile,
300 tons
the
of
sea
chemical
carried its
precursors
own
could
ghost,
produce
a
190
fishing
tons of crystal
killer
meth,
disguised
worth
on
nearly
marked
$569
and
million
outwardly
on the
harmless,
U.S. market.
crept within 8
Alongside
nautical
the drugs
miles
were
of target,
13,000
hidden. Inside its cargo hold were 200 U.S. Navy SEALs, the elite of the elite. Their gear included the 29 Malawian Quachas rebreather diving systems, allowing each man to remain underwater for 6 continuous hours without producing a single bubble. They were to be the silent blade beneath the storm, waiting for chaos above before striking from below. The numbers alone were staggering. 250 American operators and UAVs against a cartel crew of barely 150 armed guards, many poorly trained, but desperate. The tactical edge was overwhelming. Every angle had been calculated. Decoy strikes from above, silent infiltration from beneath, and simultaneous disruption of communications once inside. For the men aboard the cartel ship, it was just another day at sea. They had no idea that the world's most advanced military had already surrounded them, watching, waiting. In reality, the countdown to annihilation had already begun. These numbers are truly staggering, right? Share this video so more people can see how fierce the fight against drug cartels really is. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. At exactly 11:22 a.m. on September 3rd, 2025, the order was given. From beyond the horizon, the swarm of 50 kamikaze UAVs descended on the cartel vessel like a storm of steel hornets. Each drone screamed in at over 300 miles per hour, hugging them,
used to finance
waves
weapons,
until the final moment
assassinations,
before,
and
climbing
terror
sharply
across the
and
Western
diving
Hemisphere.
into its
As
target.
the ship pushed further
The first
north,
impact
it represented
struck
more than a
the ship's
cartel's
stern.
lifeline.
A
It was
UAV
a
carrying
floating
18
arsenal of
pounds of
chaos,
C4
a ticking
detonated
time bomb
against a
of
machine
narcotics,
gun nest,
money, and
instantly
human
killing
suffering.
3 armed guards
And on this day,
ripping
America
apart
had
the
chosen
mounted
to make
weapon.
its move.
Within 30
This was not
seconds,
just
more
another
than a dozen
smuggling ship.
explosions thundered
It
across
was
the
a
vessel.
floating time bomb,
The ship
filled with
shook
poison
violently
meant
as
for our
bulkheads
children,
ruptured,
guarded by killers,
fuel drums
and
ignited,
powered
and
by
smoke
blood money.
towers rose.
Leaving
200
it
F feet
unchecked would
into
have
the
been
Caribbean
leaving
sky.
death to drift toward our
Cartel
shores.
fighters scrambled in panic.
U.S. Secretary
Some
of Defense
above
cartels
burning.
like Tren de Aragua
Fortress
thrive on
collapsing
fear.
into confusion.
Do you believe
Below,
operations like
a
this
ring
can
of
finally
steel-clad
stop them?
warriors
Leave your
closing
answer in the comments.
The trap was no longer.
By 11:05
The
a.m.
Americans
on
were
September
inside
3rd,
the kill box,
2025,
and the cartel
United
had
States
no way
had
out.
already positioned
What do you
its
think will
pieces on the
happen next
chessboard.
as U.S.
While the drug vessel
Navy
moved
SEALs
steadily
LS
through the
rise
southern
from the depths
Caribbean,
to
American
storm the
forces
ship?
prepared an
Let's find out
operation
in
as
the
precise
next
as it
part.
was ruthless.
As the last drone
The
strike
mission was
rocked
simple
the
in theory,
cartel
but
vessel
terrifying in
11:28
execution.
a.m.
Cripple the
sea
cartel's floating
itself
fortress
erupted
without
with
risking the
movement
lives of
from
innocent
all
hostages.
sides.
The opening move
200 Navy
came from the
SEALs
skies.
surged upward,
From a
breaking the
covert
surface
base on
like ghosts
Curacao,
rising.
the Pentagon
From the
launched
abyss,
50 reconnaissance
armed with
kamikaze
suppressed
UAVs,
MP-7
each no larger
submachine
than
guns and combat knives. They clamped magnetic grapples onto the hull and began their ascent. Within 90 seconds, the first operators breached the deck. The ship's defenders, those who had survived the drone barrage, rushed to resist, but the SEALs came in waves, each squad of 12 men storming different access points. In the port side corridor, a team cleared 4 rooms in under 40 seconds, eliminating 6 cartel fighters with precision head shot. On the starboard flank, breachers used thermite charges to cut through a locked bulkhead, then toss and stun grenades. The explosion of light and sound left 8 armed guards writhing on the ground, disoriented and helpless. The battle raged deck by deck. Cartel gunmen, some half blinded by smoke, unleashed panic fire. In one firefight near the engine compartment, a SEAL squad exchanged over 200 rounds with entrenched offenders. 3 SEALs were struck shoulder, thigh, and SEAL storm vessel, forearm, but continued fighting, pushing forward until the last gunman fell. The most critical mission was a hostage rescue. At 11:35 a.m., Team Bravo breached the cargo hold where 42 civilians, men and women forced into. Labor were shackled. Guards tried to use them as human shields, but the SEALs' laser-sighted rifles cut them down in under 10 seconds. Every hostage was freed, and medical units immediately began stabilizing the weakest ones. By now, the Americans controlled nearly 70% of the ship. The bridge was shattered, the engine room secured, and cartel fighters were fleeing below deck. One SEAL assault group swept the surveillance control center, disabling every camera feed in just 3 minutes, blinding the remaining defenders completely. The casualty balance was devastating. Within just 12 minutes of boarding, the SEALs had killed 15 cartel gunmen, captured dozens more, and taken command of all key compartments. Only 5 SEALs sustained injuries, life-threatening. Against them, the cartel had lost nearly half its fighting force and all its command capability. Smoke curled skyward, gunfire crackled sporadically, but the outcome was already sealed. The cartels floated. Fortress was no longer theirs. It was now a battlefield owned by America's finest warriors. By 11:48 a.m. on September 3rd, 2025, the ship was silent, except for the crackle of flames and the boots of American soldiers pounding across its decks. In less than half an hour, the fortress of Aragua had been reduced to a shattered carcass of steel. The battlefield now belonged entirely to the United States. The results were staggering. In the span of 26 minutes, U.S. forces had neutralized the heart of one of South America's most violent cartels. 9 cartel members lay dead, including 2 mid-level commanders, while over 120 fighters were captured alive, many too badly wounded to resist. 3 of the detainees were identified as regional coordinators, men directly responsible for smuggling routes into Miami and Houston. Their arrest represented the collapse of entire branches of the cartel's operations. The seizure of contraband was even more shocking. Deep inside the ship's cargo holds, SEALs uncovered 300 tons of methamphetamine precursors stored in steel containers disguised as fertilizer. Drums. Chemical experts on scene confirmed that the stockpile could be refined into 190 tons of crystal meth, enough to flood the U.S. with more than 1.5 billion street doses. On the open market, the value soared past $569 million, a fortune in narcotics ripped straight from the cartel's grasp. Yet, the drugs were only part of the discovery. In a hidden compartment beneath the forward deck, SEAL teams pried open crates to reveal 13,000 blue, painted cash barrels. Inside, neatly bundled U.S. dollars, Colombian pesos, and Venezuelan bolivars, an estimated $450 million in liquid assets. This was the financial bloodstream of Aragua, a horde meant to purchase weapons, bribe officials, and bankroll terror across the hemisphere. Now it lay in American custody. The human toll was equally decisive. 42 hostages, laborers kidnapped from fishing villages in Venezuela and Colombia, were freed, each of them given immediate medical care. For these men and women, the nightmare ended on a deck, still scarred by fire and blood. By early afternoon, U.S. Navy helicopters thundered overhead, lifting prisoners and contraband off the smoking wreck. Standing at a podium in Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered the message with brutal clarity. This is a warning to anyone plotting to bring narcotics into the United States. Be prepared for annihilation. Trend Arwa thought they were untouchable. Today, they are broken. The Caribbean. Waters close over the cartel's last hope. In one morning, the United States had not only destroyed a ship, but sent shock waves through the entire underworld of the Americas. By the time the smoke cleared on September 3rd, 2025, the southern aftermath revealed Caribbean had witnessed